Hey guys, my name is PomminPs, or P for short, and today I'm going to be doing something a little different. Today, I'm going to be ranking all the Pokemon games based on how much I like to Nuzlocke them. Before we get started, I'm just throwing this out there that this is my opinion, okay? It's an opinion. You guys got that? Okay, everyone take one of these tests and pack them back, okay? Okay. Yeah, all the way to the back, yeah. Okay, first question, guys. What is an opinion? Class, anyone, what's an opinion? And yes, okay, Black Doom Duck, what's an opinion? Well, an opinion is when you say something, you're basically saying it's 100% fact and everyone else... No! Anyone else? What's an opinion, guys? What's... Sylvia, yeah. What's an opinion? An opinion is what you think, and someone else can have a totally different view, and that's a... Yes, finally, someone got it. Yes, that's on a stupid bit. Anyways, yeah, guys, this is my opinion, so no one yell at me in the comments, please. Or I guess do if you want to drive that algorithm, baby. Okay, so first up is the original Red and Blue. These games are like the foundation the series that I love so much was built on, but in terms of a game, they might be S tier because of influence, but if we're talking Nuzlocks, I'm actually thinking D tier. They aren't terrible. My next video is actually like a Kanto run, but it's in the remakes for a reason, I think. The OG Game Boy is super slow, and it's not as visually nice to look at as the remakes, and honestly, since Leaf Green was my first Pokemon game, I almost feel a bias towards those Kanto games versus the originals. Someone did ask for an OG Red and Blue run in the comments recently. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name off the top of my head. It's a goofy little profile picture I laughed at, but I'll put it on the screen. So let me know if you want to see one of those. In terms of difficulty and encounters and stuff, I'm going to tackle those in a bit with the remakes since I've only done a couple of runs in these OG games. So yeah, I'm gonna keep it in D tier, I think. Okay, so next up is Pokemon Yellow. Now, I actually really like Pokemon Yellow. I sound a little bit contradictory now because I did just say that Red and Blue are D tier, but I really like the gimmick of this game. I think it's great. You start with a Pikachu like Ash and you play through the game facing off against teams that were like adjusted to how the anime played out, and I grew up watching that, so it felt really cool to play this one. It's something I'd actually love to see in some newer games, maybe not an entire version like how Pokemon Yellow is, but maybe like an alternate mode where you kind of follow the story of the anime that's coming out. I think that'd be really cool. Starting with a Pikachu also does make this game more challenging as well. Like, even Charmander can beat Brock. I did that in my Pokemon C run, but Pikachu has no chance, so you have to rely on good encounters. One of the problems is you're almost always guaranteed like half the good encounters in the game. So I'm going to put Pokemon Yellow in C tier, I think, but definitely the best Kanto game on the Game Boy Color for sure. Okay, so Gold and Silver. Now, I'm going to get some hate for this one, but I feel in like a kind of similar way to Red and Blue, since the remakes of these games are just so good. My last video was actually in Heart Gold, doing Q only, so go check that out. But those games aren't great. Sure, Johto kind of sucks as a region. Like, why do the gym leaders have barely any Johto Pokemon? And the level curve is terrible. Like, why does the champion have level 50 Pokemon? What I will say about Gen 2, though, on the Game Boy Color is the sprites are awesome. I love them. Like, this Gengar sprite is really sick. I might get that to join my Castley tattoo. I am going to throw Gold and Silver into F tier, but don't go to the comments right away. I'm not saying they're unplayable. I'm saying they're going in the F tier because they are completely replaced by the remakes, in my opinion. I would almost never pick up this game because I could just play Heart Gold, Soul Silver instead. Okay, so I'm not going to spend too much time on Crystal here since it's basically like Gold and Silver with the best parts of the remakes, but back then it was the best version for sure of Johto. I'm going to put this at the top of D tier. I think, because I'd rather play this game than the OG Red and Blue, but I think Pokemon Yellow is just so camp that I love it. Yeah, top of D tier. Okay, Ruby and Sapphire, the introduction to Hoenn. Ruby and Sapphire get overshadowed by their more successful younger brother down here, but I still think they're amazing games. The introduction of abilities were groundbreaking for Nuzlocke, with things like Intimidate making otherwise pretty bad Pokemon pretty good, and the overall variety of encounters was really refreshing compared to the other generations. I feel like in Gen 1 and 2, you always kind of had the same basic team, which is a problem in some games that I'm going to get to. But in Ruby and Sapphire, I feel like you could have a pretty flexible team. Take, for example, like electric types. In some games, Sinnoh, there's one clear favorite that everyone uses, but in this game, you could use Magneton or Manectric or Lancern, who's a really big fan favorite now, thanks to Emerald Kaizo. The difficulty is pretty solid too, with the biggest problem being the level caps in the mid-game, in my opinion. There's so much to do with so much XP to share, especially if you're doing a run with some limited team members. Also, not having the physical special split yet really hurts these games, making some fights easier like any of the Team Aqua and Magma bosses because of their dark types. Overall, I really enjoyed these games, especially for Nuzlocking, so I'm going to put them in our highest tier so far. I'm going to put them in B tier. The GOAT has arrived, ladies and gentlemen. Pokemon Emerald is the gold standard of Pokemon series games. It took the solid games that Ruby and Sapphire were and combined them into the consensus choice of best Pokemon game. The stories were combined, creating a new story that somehow made sense and was better, and you get to battle both of the commanders, who have distinct characters that you miss out on by playing either Ruby or Sapphire. There's also some more solid variety, putting some version exclusives in the same game, which is great for challenges like my M-Only challenge, where I could have got Mawile in addition as well. The difficulty is great with every leader getting some more Pokemon, and like some better ones too, with Watson getting Manectric as an ace, and Juan using Kingdra instead of Wallace's Melodic. Oh yeah, Juan. Steven should still be the champion in my opinion. I hate to have to go find him after and take him down, but that's not a big deal for me. That might be honestly my only problem with the game. Oh, and that Sceptile is mono grass. Like, that's like so dumb. Like Blaziken's fire fighting, Swampert, water ground, Sceptile is just grass. Like, he feels left out. Give him another one. I think we all know where Emerald's going though, guys. It's going in S tier. Okay, so we have Fire Red and Leaf Green here next. These were my first games ever. See, I think my biggest issue with these games is that Kanto is just so underdeveloped as a whole. And it's not really Kanto's fault. I think the biggest problem is like the lack of Pokemon. Again, I don't know if that's fair because it is a faithful remake of the original. Wait, remember that thing with Bill? That got added. Why didn't they add more Pokemon? What the hell was that? It definitely suffers from being in the same generation as Emerald, since the juxtaposition between the encounter variety in the two games is unbelievable. It's like night and day. Like, when I'm trying to play in Letterlocks, it's super difficult because of the number of Pokemon is just so low in these games. Like, C had what, 6 Pokemon? And 2 of them were Caterpie and Cubone. I think there's also just like a lack of substance to Kanto, which again, isn't Kanto's fault because it was the first region, but there's almost nothing to do. Like, Lavender Town is really cool, but it's the only not gym related thing that you do in the entire game. Like, you just kind of go from gym to gym to gym. Like, trust me, I'm trying to write an entertaining video for my next video, which is in Leaf Green, but it's going so bad that I'm doing this instead. Again, like with Emerald, the lack of the physical special split is really working against it too, because it just makes so many Pokemon completely useless, like Rapidash for example. Overall, these games can be crazy nostalgia, but if I had to choose, I'd probably pick up something else. I think I'm going to put them just ahead of Yellow, but maybe not ahead of Ruby and Sapphire. So I think I'm going to throw them in like high to mid C tier. So next up, we've got Diamond and Pearl and the introduction to the Sinnoh region. I think Sinnoh is up there for the best region of all time for me. Some amazing iconic Pokemon were introduced here, like Kricketot and Chingling, some real heavy hitters. One thing this game does do great is pacing. I love having to manage XP when Wake and Maylene have the same level cap. I think it's a unique challenge that some people don't like, but I'm really all for it. I also really like how strong Cynthia is. Like, I know it's a meme about how strong she is now, but her Garchomp is the first real Pokemon you need an entire team member for your Elite Four team just to deal with. It's something you didn't even need to do with like Steven's Metagross, and I really appreciate that. I know I'm kind of singing Sinnoh's praises right now, but there are some really terrible things about these games too. The sheer amount of double battles with AI teammates is about 10 too many. I'm so sick of losing runs thanks to Barry spamming Stockpile and Swallow over and over, or Cheryl's Chansey missing its 8th Egg Bomb in a row. Speaking of the forest, honey trees are an actual military torture tactic, like they have to be. Like 6 in-game hours, go f*** yourself. Another thing is that some gym leaders are really fun and challenging, like Wake and Maylene, but then you have Byron and Gardenia, who are basically just giving the badge out at the door. Same with Volkner, like his first name is a ripoff of Faulkner from Johto, and his team is trash, and he's the 8th gym leader? Give me a break. Overall, these games are pretty solid, but they also get knocked down a bit thanks to the existence of the other Sinnoh game. So I'm going to throw them at the top of B tier. Next up is another alternate version that is hailed as one of the best of all time. Platinum. Now I'm just going to put this out there, but Platinum does have a lot of the same problems that Diamond and Pearl have with like the honey trees and the AI double battles. But what it did do was actually change the story and the encounters to increase variety. There's actually some fire types in this game, which is fantastic. And now Fantina is actually home to take on as the 3rd gym leader. In my opinion though, I actually like taking on Fantina 5th because I think it's actually better. Like, you go to Celestic Town and you don't really have a pointer on where to go next, but in Diamond and Pearl, you know you have to take on Fantina still. The best part about these games has got to be the increase in the Elite Four and Barry's difficulty specifically. Barry actually evolves his Pokemon at like a regular rate, which makes his fights something you actually have to plan for, and not just like a grunt from Team Galactic over and over again. Overall, I think I'm going to be kind of controversial here, but I'm going to put Platinum in high A tier. I think Emerald is genuinely on a different level than Platinum. Okay, so Heart Gold and Soul Silver. These games are fantastic, like I said earlier, but they've got some problems. One thing is that I hate the lack of encounters. Like, I swear in a regular Nuzlocke, you have almost every starting route Pokemon and Geodude, plus a starter, which is almost enough to deal with the entire game. I think this game does do a good job at spiking in difficulty for the Elite Four though. Lance can be super tough without a solid, fast and bulky Ice Beam user, and that's a lot of boxes to check when you can't really guarantee one in this game. What I will say for this game is that the possible different runs are really carried by the large amount of encounters before the first gym. Like I did U and Q in Johto, which are 2 letters I genuinely thought I'd never actually do. Heart Gold and Soul Silver still have all the Johto problems, which is unavoidable, but I think they are solid games with good variety and a little bit of challenge near the end. I think I'm going to put these games in high B tier just ahead of Diamond and Pearl. Okay, it's time for Unova. First up is the original Black and White. I'm going to start with a disclaimer, but I love the Unova games. They're going to be pretty high. The rival fights are a point of argument in the Nuzlocke community because I think there's something like 20 fights in the main game, which is definitely too much. But at least the rivals aren't super useless and can be kind of a surprise because I'm not expecting to fight another battle so soon. I wish Charon did get more than 4 Pokemon though. It's a little anticlimactic for the final rival battle to be a 6v4. I think the difficulty of these gyms is really good, like especially the mid game of Berg, Elisa, and Clay. It's really challenging and can end a lot of runs pretty easily. Leavanny is fully evolved at the level cap of 23, so if you don't have a fire type, you really gotta get creative. Same with Excadrill and honestly the Emolgas as well. You can't just have a ground type check, you have to have something that can hit it for rock type damage. Without a solid encounter, you do really need to get creative, and that's something I think the Unova games do really well. Something I love and hate at the same time is the lack of Pokemon in this region. Using only Unova Pokemon was a cool and honestly a really brave choice that I really respect, but I do feel like I'm missing out on some encounters here and there. I've been trying to make a new Letterlock work in the OG Black and White, but it's literally impossible. You only get the starter, Patrat, Lillipup, Purrloin, and an Elemental Monkey before the first gym. That's only 5 letters and one of them is O, and Oshawtt's the only O Pokemon available. The Elite Four in this game is amazing too. It's definitely a little weak, especially with a Psychic and a Ghost type member that can be taken down by one Dark type, but the N and Getsis fights are some of, if not the hardest battles in these vanilla games. Really amazing. Overall, Black and White are going to go in the A tier, but under Platinum. I think these are the best original versions in the entire main series, but there are some alternate versions that have them beat. Speaking of that, let's talk about Black 2 and White 2, the first true sequels in the franchise. I love the callbacks and the tie-ins from the first game that make these ones feel like time has passed, but the events from the first game really happened. Like, Charon is a gym leader now, Bianca isn't a rival but almost like a mentor to you, and some of the other gym leaders have retired like Bryson and Lenora. And even directly mentions the player character at the climax of the story when you battle Getsis. I really like that. I also like how this game actively tries to fix issues with the previous ones. Like, for example, the Unova Dex isn't new anymore, so they mix in a bunch of Pokemon from all the other regions, which gives the player like a whole bunch of new encounter variety and opens the door to tons of different runs. I will say this is a problem with both Unova games, but Audino frequency in Shaking Grass is a little too high. Like, there's some Pokemon you just won't get because you don't want to wait for the 5% encounter. In terms of difficulty, I think the new gym leaders are a bit easier in my opinion. Roxy is solid, but with a steel type and a couple fire types available in the Verbank complex, her ace can't really do anything. But his ace Jellicent isn't anything too crazy to handle, like how Drayden's Haxorus can be. It does try to fix the rival problem though, making Hugh almost non-existent, but his team does still only have 4 Pokemon, which is kinda lame. I haven't discussed the most interesting part of the game, challenge mode. Now, I've heard from the comments that challenge mode is artificial since the stats don't go up, only the level. But competitive items and more Pokemon are added to every team, which is something that I really like. Some suggested to do a challenge mode run with the normal mode level caps, so that's something I've been looking into. These games make the best of my favorite region in Pokemon, and I think these are the best DS Pokemon games to Nuzlocke. So I'm going to put them in S tier, just under Emerald. Alright, so we're officially moving into the 3DS generation. Pokemon X and Y are alright. I see so much potential in these games, but the cons definitely outweigh the pros. For example, this is the only game where Game Freak didn't make an alternate or a sequel, which kind of shows how much of a mess they were. They didn't sell particularly well if I remember correctly, and the pacing is all over the place. I complained a lot in my Pokemon F only video, so I'm not going to rehash that now. I think my biggest issue is the lack of difficulty in these games. I had a cool interaction on TikTok where someone actually said that Diantha wasn't that bad, and they're honestly not wrong. The problem is that you get so many insane Pokemon throughout Kalos that you basically have a super team by the end. Like, Florges can sweep through the champion no problem, I showed that in my video. The Elite Four is pretty lackluster, none of the gym leaders are really that difficult, and the level curve is so all over the place. The Lysander stuff isn't hard either because you can just overlevel. These games had so much going for them, and there are some great things, like the city designs are amazing, the soundtrack is awesome, and the new Pokemon are pretty solid too. It just feels like they didn't make the game with proper difficulty in mind. So with that, I'm going to put X and Y in low C tier, just under Pokemon Yellow. Okay, so ORAS, or I guess Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. I won't spend too much time here since I think it's a pretty faithful remake. The key differences in my eyes are the addition of Mega Evolution, the physical special split, and the addition of Fairy type. I think almost all of these are pretty good changes. Megas are a nice added challenge to play around if you don't use them like I don't, and it almost creates like a boss monster atmosphere that I really like. I do think that if you use Megas, it makes this game way too easy. Also, the Fairy type definitely makes more Pokemon viable, but at the same time, it makes other key battles easier, like Drake for example. And of course, the same thing kind of goes for the physical special split, making more Pokemon viable while also making some fights easier. Overall, I think these are pretty good remakes. I still think I do prefer the originals because they have the GBA charm, and again, I really like the originals. So I'm going to throw Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire just under the GBA games in low B tier. Okay, I think this is going to be my hottest take of the video. Pokemon Sun and Moon are awful to Nuzlocke. Plain and simple. The layout of the map is super convoluted without a true Elite Four and champion. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but this game design really rubs me the wrong way. The sheer number of Pokemon is too much, which is something I didn't think I'd ever complain about. I genuinely got overwhelmed trying to plan out possible encounters for Letterlock. Just before the first totem, you have access to something like 30 Pokemon with only like 4 or 5 named locations. You miss out on so many cool Pokemon thanks to these encounter tables, and it could be so much better. Like, why is the trainer school not a separate named location? No one is skipping an encounter to wait for a Magnemite. I'm also not a big fan of totem Pokemon. Wait, that reminds me. Before that, why can wild Pokemon call reinforcement? That was the thing that made me hate this game the most. Like, I'm trying to catch a Pikipek over here. Stop calling partners and forcing me to overlevel and have to run away. Anyways, the totem system isn't really my cup of tea. I really don't like the idea of having a level cap for a wild Pokemon battle, and then essentially having another important fight right after within a couple levels, no new locations to replace any lost team members either. I just really don't like fighting 2v1s every other battle. The Pokemon added in this generation are great though in my opinion. I love Decidueye and Vikavolt and Kommo-o. Great additions to the Pokedex. I think my biggest problem is that Sun and Moon feel like a step away from the normal formula, but not enough where it feels different like Sword and Shield. It almost feels like they were too scared to change it completely and then backtrack to add additional things of Pokemon, like the Kahunas as almost gym leaders. So I'm gonna have to put Sun and Moon in high D tier. I know, I'm being a little harsh, but I've honestly never had a great experience playing these games. Okay, next are the sequels Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. I've actually never played these, not once. When it came out, I was a junior in high school and I wasn't spending too much time on Pokemon, and I had played the original Sun and Moon and I didn't like it. So I skipped this one. Maybe I'll do a blind run for you guys at some point if you guys would like that, but for now I'm gonna leave this off the board. Another quick one is Pokemon Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu. Now, we all know these aren't great games to Nuzlocke. All overworld encounters, easy catching, easy battles, like look at the champions team. What I will say though is that these games are great casual fun. These games brought me back into Pokemon. I was feeling like I had outgrown it until quarantine when I picked up my sister's copy of Let's Go Eevee and casually played through it and had a blast. Then I picked up the next game on our list and here we are, making Pokemon YouTube videos with almost 1,400 cool people along for the ride. It's F tier, it's the bottom of F tier. We all know it. Okay, so Sword and Shield are great games and you can't tell me otherwise. I love the revamp of the traditional gym challenge and I loved exploring the limited open space of the wild area. I think it was a great direction to bring the franchise and Scarlet and Violet proved that in the next generation. But for a Nuzlocke, it's okay, it's really long. Overworld encounters for me make the game really difficult, and this wasn't really fixed in Scarlet and Violet, but having a wild area as a blanket term for the entire space to get encounters makes it really difficult to create rules for those encounters. I've seen people use badges as a rule to get a new wild area encounter, which I don't love. I know Nuzlocke rules are like already made up, but that feels like even too far for my made up. What I will say is that the gym battles feel good and challenging, especially if you don't use Dynamax, which makes them really, really fun. The gym challenges are a little overlooked too, because I think they're cute and fun, and in a new way, I love them. Hop is garbage, so I'm going to choose to ignore him, but I do like Leon, and I think his team is pretty solid and diverse. I would talk about these games for a little longer, but since we're talking about only Nuzlocks today, this game really struggles for me. That being said, it's not terrible. I'm going to put Sword and Shield in low C tier, just under X and Y. Not as a game, but as a Nuzlockable game. Oh, do I really need to do this one? Okay, BDSP is bad. I think this game just gets the remake idea wrong. Like, it takes nothing from Platinum, which if we take a look at the tier list, it is the best Sinnoh game. The graphics are a little tough, but I'm not the biggest hater on them. They're fine. I think the biggest miss in this game though is the underground. The underground was an afterthought in the original game, and for some reason they made it the center of attention in the remake. It brings Pokemon not available in the normal game at higher levels and at any point in the game. It almost undermines the entire idea of a Nuzlocke. Like, hey, do you want any Pokemon you want at any point and you can pick which one? Come on, I'm done talking about these games. They're still Diamond and Pearl, I guess, so they're not terrible, but I'd rather play the originals. I'm going to put these guys at the bottom of D tier. Okay, I'm going to skip Legends. I loved Legends and I'm not going to go into detail because this video is already long enough and it's only about Nuzlocke. It's a great game, but it's not for Nuzlocking. Just play it normally, I mean it. I'm going to leave it off the board. We've reached the last games of the list, the newest ones, Scarlet and Violet. I want to say right off the bat that I'm not going to include performance issues in my ranking. As someone who's played it on the Yuzu and it runs like a real game, it's amazing. This game has done something really interesting and I'm genuinely excited to see where it goes in the future. The open world still has some problems that I discussed a little bit when talking about Sword and Shield. Encounters just aren't as random as they should be, which is super unfortunate. I know people have just covered their eyes and ran forward until they encountered a Pokemon, but that just doesn't do it for me. I've seen other people use the Terra raid dens to have real random chance, but that also goes against the entire pre-planning of runs that I really like. The gyms are definitely interesting, with Terra Pokemon making the overall coverage of the team much better. I like that. They definitely need a power boost, but that's okay. I don't remember the water type leader, but you can actually walk through that guy like he's a grunt. I do enjoy the idea of using the Titans and Team Star bases as other level caps, but those f***ing car Pokemon are so stupid. I hate them. But overall, I'm excited for the DLC and I'm gonna grind it as soon as it comes out. But as a Nuzlockable game, it's too long, like the intro's over an hour. And the encounters being overworld are something the Nuzlocke community still needs to figure out, I think. I'm gonna put Scarlet and Violet at the bottom of C tier. So, to recap the list, in F tier, we've got the Let's Go games and the original Gold and Silver. D tier has BDSP, Red and Blue, Crystal, and Sun and Moon. In the C tier, we have Sword and Shield, the new boys on the block in Scarlet and Violet, X and Y, our highest Gen 1 game in Pokemon Yellow, and the Gen 1 remakes in Leaf Green and Fire Red. To start off the upper tiers, the B tier has both Oraz and the original Ruby and Sapphire, the better Diamond and Pearl, and the best remakes, Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Our A tier has the best base games, Black and White, and the quintessential Sinnoh game, Platinum. And finally, we've got our two S tier games, the best sequels in Black 2 and White 2, and the best Nuzlockable Pokemon game, Pokemon Emerald. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is something new for me, so let me know if you want to see more of this content by hitting the like button and subscribing if you haven't already. Also, feel free to leave your own lists in the comments. I want to read them. That's all for me though, so if you still need something to watch, check out my Pokemon Heart Gold's Q only run. It was a lot of fun. Or if you want something with a few more encounters, check out my Sapphire M only run. But with that being said guys, my name is PomminPs, or P for short, and I'll see you next time.